when I'm deep inside of me. Don't be too concerned, I won't ask for nothing while I'm gone. But when I want sincerity, tell me where else can I turn? 'Cause you're the one that I depend upon. Honesty is such a lonely word. Everyone is so untrue. And honesty is hardly ever heard, and mostly what I need from you.
Such a longing for honesty that we all feel. And yet we also can't help but grapple with our own ways in which we have been less than true with others. It kind of creates this tension within us that we want truth. We want to know what we know and know that it's real and right, and yet we're not always able to muster that ourselves. You know, you can build a whole world upon a lie. You can build an entire life, a relationship, or even a religion on a lie. It happens in big and small ways. I remember a time when I was in my very early 20s. I was somewhere and there was this gorgeous young woman standing with some friends across the room from me. And after a while, I noticed that she kept looking at me. I mean, seriously, she could not keep her eyes off of me. Now, keep in mind, this was the most beautiful woman in the whole place, maybe the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. I was feeling pretty good at that moment. This was not a normal experience for me. I was, often an awkward kid growing up, but with this undiscovered Miss America giving me all this attention, I started feeling pretty good about myself. Like really good about myself. And I started to feel like, I know I should be saying that it was her brains that I was attracted to, but since our theme is truth, I didn't know much about her brains, and I cannot tell a lie. But anyway, I started scanning the room and looking at the other guys, kind of feeling pity for them. I was like, well, look around, I'm the dude. That was until I realized that she was actually making eyes at a guy who was standing right behind me. But for that brief moment, I was Casanova in my own mind. And it was a beautiful moment while it lasted. But the point is that we have misperceptions and misunderstandings all the time until we realize it, and as far as we know, it's the truth. And we're living in it, and we're believing it. They say perception is 90% of reality. That's why we could say that we're almost always living in a trance of some kind. If your father told you you'd never amount to anything, you may have lived with that self-understanding for a long time. You might still be living with it until something breaks the spell, like realizing that you truly matter. I want to break some spells this month as we engage this theme of truth. Another one is that if someone tells you from the time you're very young that your religion is the one and only true religion and all others are false, You can go around looking at people of other faiths and feel sorry for them and feel better than them, thinking, poor guy believes in that false scripture, that false prophet. I guess he doesn't know any better. Too bad for that woman. I mean, God doesn't recognize her prayers, won't let her into heaven because she calls God by the wrong name. And if the world tells you that you have the wrong hips or lips or hair or complexion, it can become your reality if you believe it. Or if the world tells you you have the right hips or lips or complexion or hair, you can believe that too. What happens when we stop believing these false narratives and other self-deceptions that we've adopted out of culture or out of habit or out of self-protection? A term I've been hearing lately is radical self-honesty. It sounds nice, but if we're really that honest with ourselves, most of us would have to come face to face with some pretty hard truths. We could discover things about ourselves, admit things to ourselves that our culture says we're not supposed to feel and we're not supposed to want because they're embarrassing or shameful, we're told. We might confront our own pettiness or our own arrogance or the ways that we sometimes mislead or exaggerate. We might have to admit to desires that are not considered acceptable. If we are radically honest, there are parents who would admit at times they don't like their own children. They love them, they just don't like them very much. But it's kind of taboo. We hide these truths from ourselves because they make us feel guilty or ashamed. Radical self-honesty. That's a courageous path. To make it work, it requires radical self-compassion and forgiveness. Radical self-honesty requires radical self-acceptance too. I want to talk about how liberating ourselves from self-deception can lead us to a powerful sense of self and other and of joy. Insight meditation teacher Tara Brach gives an evolutionary explanation for what causes us to deceive ourselves and others. In a podcast, she's got a great podcast series that she does, and this one's called The Joy of Getting Real. And Brock describes the three parts of the brain. There's the oldest part, the reptilian brain, which causes us to act to avoid harm. That's its main purpose. It's instinctual. The reptilian brain was developed for the purpose of helping us to avoid being eaten or killed or starving to death. It's reactive. It's self-preserving. And then the mammalian brain, this second part of our brain that developed, teaches us to act in ways that enhance pleasure, to improve ourselves, to seek rewards. It's developed to reinforce behaviors that are good for us. When we eat an apple or some healthy food, that part of our brain sends positive feelings throughout our entire body to reinforce this healthy behavior so that we'll do it again. And then there's the primate brain, the newest part of our brain, and its focus is on attachment. It's that part of us that knows that our survival depends on being connected to others. So we stretch the truth sometimes to avoid bad consequences out of fear of failure or of rejection or of shame. We might lie about the reason we missed work because we're afraid we'll lose our job if we don't. We might lie about feeling attracted to someone out of fear that we'll lose our marriage. Or a person might lie about their sexual orientation out of fear of rejection. We might lie to get a date or to get a job. I imagine people doing this on those dating sites. A lot of lies, I imagine, on these sites to get someone to swipe right or left or whichever direction you're trying to get people to swipe. We blame others or we judge others in order to preserve ourselves or let ourselves off the hook. Some of us get pretty good at blaming ourselves just so that we don't have to deal with what's real, maybe what someone else has done. When we become more honest with ourselves, we become less judgmental of others. Now, we can all get fixated on what we want to the point that we can rationalize almost any action or behavior in order to get it and in order to still feel good about ourselves. The problem with all this self-deceiving is that it creates a veil between us and our ability to experience our true self. Tara Brach, in her book, True Refuge, tells a story of a Catholic woman who came to her for a Buddhist retreat. She's a Buddhist teacher, and she asked for teachings on how to be present with someone who's dying. It was the woman's husband who was dying, and they'd agreed that they were not going to bring in a priest and that she was going to keep him company during his passing. Now, the woman wanted guidance on how to really do this well. And her history was this sense of not getting it right. She had this belief that she was going to blow it in some way. She had a lot of fear, and so she was basically saying, how do I do it right? And wanted a Buddhism 101 course in being with the dying. Brock's response was, just be present with him and love him whatever comes up. Because this woman was Catholic, Tara Brach mentioned that she'd just come from a conference recently with Father Keating about compassion. And he described his language for this kind of radical presence was, I consent. Whatever comes up, there's this honesty of really recognizing it and saying, I consent. It's like saying yes and agreeing that whatever is real in the moment is what is. Brock saw this woman weeks later, and here's what happened for her. She said she went through a process where she tried to say, I consent and open to things. But she said one morning, her husband brought up that he didn't have long left. And in that moment, she said, oh, hon, you're doing really well right now. Come on, let me make some tea for you. And in that moment, she felt like 1,000 miles of distance between them. What had she done? She had denied, she had turned away from what was real. So while she was making the tea, she said this prayer to herself, please, may I bring presence and love to what's happening. And she said, after those moments, whatever would come up, the fear, sadness, she'd say, and she'd really connect with, I consent. When she had the feeling of doing it wrong, okay, I feel bad. I consent. Her grief, the deep, deep grief came up. She kept doing it. I consent. Then she said, when I allowed myself to pause and came home to presence, I did know what to say to him. I did know how to be with him in silence. She intuitively sensed the words of encouragement that were needed. or when to just be quiet. She said that in those moments of reality, or really connecting with tenderness, she said, there was no longer a sense of him and me, but rather we were a field of loving, a field of total openness and warmth and light. She said, after it was all over, that even though he was gone, the field of loving still remains. She carries that with her now from that experience. So Brock says, this is the gift of radical honesty and radical acceptance of what comes. That when we offer that quality of presence to our life, we come into a reality that has a timeless love. We come into a reality where that transparency, where something very sacred shines through. And whether somebody is alive or somebody is dead, we are in touch with something that is bigger than the coming and the going. That's what's possible. People long to be real with others, to be authentic, and to be with others who are authentic. We don't want to have to pretend. We do want to just be. Be who we are. Be okay with that. Be okay with it. We want to be free and not cover over and not cover up out of fear or out of shame. So here's your homework for this week. It's to say yes to whatever's real. Whatever you feel in any given moment, own it. Consent to it. Whether it's fear, whether it's sadness, whether it's sorrow or desire, I consent. It'll mean letting go of judgments, of blaming and obsessive doing. When you feel these things, turn inward. Try to touch what's real and what's actually going on. It's okay. You're okay. It's real. All Souls is a place and a community that's founded on the very idea that we can be ourselves, that we can be real with what we believe or don't believe, or what we desire or don't desire. We can be free, and we can be real and authentic, and it's okay. One of the places that we practice is in the small groups, like our soulful circles or our men's groups and our women's groups. For some of us, this kind of self-acceptance begins with one other individual, like in therapy, where somebody can sit and listen without judgment. And then building on that, we can begin to be more real with others in our lives. Imagine the joy of living without self-aversion, without self-deception, without having to blame and shame and judge as a strategy for feeling okay or doing it to ourselves. It's totally possible. It begins with being honest with ourselves about our wants and our fears and accepting what's real. There is a profound joy in it, in being in touch with our truth, the truth of our experience and who we are. Because underneath that truth is our essence. And our essence is creativity and love. I love you. Amen.
happy you're visiting with us online today. We love connecting with people all across the country and around the world, sharing our powerful message of love beyond belief.
There's something new happening here. You can now join All Souls as a virtual member. Our virtual membership is designed for friends who live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and who want to engage with All Souls in a meaningful way.
You can be part of an expanding family, a global family really, wherever you are. If you live in Oklahoma,
Ohio,
or Orange County, California,
Canada,
or Cameroon. By becoming a virtual member, you'll be able to deepen your connections with members and friends here in Tulsa and with members wherever you are.
Each week, you'll receive special All Souls content tailored for you, our virtual members. Virtual members have access to pastoral care, to personal prayers, and also receive invitations to exclusive web events.
You can learn more, and if you're ready, you can become a virtual member today by visiting allsoulschurch.org/virtual membership.
We're grateful our ministries are having a positive impact on your life, and we want to share the good news of love beyond belief with more and more people. So no matter what, we need your support to keep this ministry growing and thriving, so please consider making a gift today. You can do so by texting
LOVEBB for Love Beyond Belief to 73256 or simply visit our website. You are a blessing in our lives. May you be blessed
and be a blessing.